Hey, it's Kishore from Tested, and these are my favorite things of 2018. I'm doing something a little different this year. I'm showing you kind of my year in a nutshell through some of my favorite items of this year. And that has to start with what I said last year during this video, which is that 2018 was going to be the year of Thanos, and it sure was. And that's why I have my Thanos jersey, my Infinity Gauntlet, but my most prized Thanos possession is definitely this Bowen statue that actually came out a number of years ago. It's an incredible sculpt of Thanos sitting on his floating throne. This is most reminiscent of the Thanos Quest series, and I love just the look on his face. It's one of my favorite toys, but it's much more of a collectible than anything else. It's a rare item these days. It typically goes for a fair amount of change, but I managed to finally gift myself one, and it sits atop my office looking down upon me in all its glory. And it's easily my favorite Thanos sculpt of all time. We got to talk about video games now. And my favorite video game system of the year has to be the Switch. My kid plays it all the time. And while video games and kids don't always go together in terms of bringing the family together, Nintendo just absolutely blew it out of the water with the new Labo kit this year. And I get it. You're about to make fun of me for recommending a piece of cardboard, but I haven't had this much fun putting together a cardboard kit with my son in all of my years of making stuff with him. He's not the greatest natural gifted maker, and cardboard is like a great entry point for him to just get started. And just the elegance of putting this kit together, particularly the driving wheel, which we hooked up to Mario Kart, was just some of the best times we had together building something. It was really accessible, and while he hasn't used that driving kit every time he plays Mario Kart, it was really about that build process and getting him excited to do much more with cardboard that really made it worthwhile. I get it's a lot of money for some cardboard, but the elegance of the build process and that time to build a product like this makes Labo easily one of my favorites of the year. I read a ton of science books this year, like I do every year, and there's so many to choose from. But my favorite has to be this one from science writers Betsy Mason and Greg Miller. It's called All Over the Map. It's the story of the world in 200 different historical maps, from looking at the bottom of the ocean to the surface of Mars, and delving deep into the stories behind how these maps were created. There's some of the most famous images in all of science enshrined in this book, and then ones that are just unforgettable below the radar. This is one of the most beautiful books ever created in science, I have to say. If I still had a coffee table, that's where this would live. But what I was really surprised about was just all these hidden gems of stories behind some of the drawings in here, especially the ones of neurons in the brain and some of the earliest drawings of neurons and how they connect to each other, which are history in neuroscience that every neuroscience student sees, but seeing the story sort of laid out as told through those images, easily the best science book of the year for me. This year was a year of board games in my family. On Father's Day, my family took me to a new game parlor. It's actually called the Game Parlor. It's a board game cafe in my neighborhood, and it became our favorite destination to play video games pretty much like a couple nights a week. My wife actually built and sold her first board game, but the game that we went to most of all is this pretty simple dice game called Dragonwood. Dragonwood is just basically a community card game where a number of creatures come out and you roll dice to nab and kill the creatures and collect enough points by killing these creatures to earn the victory condition. I have to say, it's one of those games that you can start in like 2 minutes, really enjoyable, wraps up in 15 minutes. We sometimes would play it just before dinner time when we're all sitting there. It was basically like beginner D&D for my son. And it was the best quick game of the year that we played. Lastly, this year was a tough year for many in California with all of the wildfires. And I made one purchase early this year that ended up being one of the saviors, which is this way overpowered air filter called the Air Mega 300. It moves about 1,250 square feet of air every day, which is a ton of air power for a filter like this. It has multi-stages involved, it has a nice design. It actually has an integrated light system that tells you the quality of the air inside. I bought it because we live near a transit line and there's all this soot that usually comes up and hits our house and invades our windows, and I thought it would be great for that. But when it came down to the time when all of the smoke invaded San Francisco and the air quality was worse than anywhere else in the world, this was a lifesaver. It's a really expensive product, but one that is easily the best in its class, that gave world-class air filtration inside of our home. And it just reminds, every time I look at it, it reminds me of how lucky we were to be able to have something like this in those devastating times. These are some of my favorite things of the year, and I'll just leave you with one that just cracks me up every time I look at it. I started a series at the Alamo Drafthouse where we watch movies we love, and we watched Raiders of the Lost Ark earlier this year. And from that, I bought a candle of a Nazi. Now, normally I wouldn't recommend that, but when you light this one up, the Nazi's face melts. And I think there's no better message for 2018 than that.